Never forget that your health is an investment, not an expense. Unknown. On today's episode, I am going to bring you a guest who's going to talk to us about sleeping, eating, biohacking our bodies so we can stay healthy as entrepreneurs and continue to serve our business and our families to the best of our abilities for many, many years to come. You have the power to be the boss of your own life. I'm your host, Monica Allen. I'm a wife, mom, entrepreneur, best-selling author, lifelong learner, and your biz bestie. I have a love and passion for all things small business. Growing my own company from $700 to over 7 figures annually, my goal is to bring you inspiration, business-focused topics and tips, encouragement, and a community that helps you launch, grow, and scale your business, whether you are a dreamer, a side hustler, or a seasoned entrepreneur. You are listening to the Become Your Own Boss podcast. This episode is being brought to you by VidKid.School. What are your kids up to this summer? If you find that they like being on their devices like mine do, check out VidKid.School. That's VidKid.School, where they can learn how to animate, edit, and create their own YouTube videos, and perhaps get monetized and become entrepreneurs themselves. That is www.vidkid.school. Link is in the show notes. I am so thrilled to bring you today's episode because we all know and have probably heard the phrase that your health is your wealth. And truly, being healthy allows you to do so many things. Even if you think about when you just don't feel well, from a cold, a head cold, or just you're exhausted, you cannot get as much done. So I am so excited to bring you this episode today where we're going to talk about sleeping, getting enough sleep, biohacking, and so many things that will extend your life and your health for your family and for your business. My guest today is a kinesiologist, certified sleep science coach, health consultant, and host of the Becoming Limitless Podcast. She helps entrepreneurs scale their business by optimizing their health, focus, and productivity with science and biohacking. On today's episode, I have Tanessa Shears. I am so excited for her to share all of her knowledge so we entrepreneurs can work on our health. Take a listen to my interview with Tanessa. So today I have with me Tanessa. Tanessa, it is so nice to have you on the show. I cannot wait to dive right in. Welcome.
Hi, Monica. Thank you for having me on. I'm looking forward to today's conversation.
Me too. And the main reason why is because as an entrepreneur and all the entrepreneurs that I know, we often are not as focused on our health as we need to be. And so I am very excited about talking about sleep and health and how we can be better and truly be the boss of our entire lives. That is what I talk about so much. It's not about just being the boss of your business, but it's about being the boss of your entire life, and your health is truly your wealth. So tell me about what brought you to start your business and what problem were you trying to solve?
Yeah, well, I opened my business in 2014, and originally I was a personal trainer because I fell in love with working out after learning that it wasn't that bad to sweat all the time. I mean, I was the girl who would, show up late to PE just so I didn't have to get sweaty during the run at the beginning. So that was me, but fell in love with fitness and personal training. And my business has evolved since then as I have learned along the way. And I've got my degree in kinesiology and learning and incorporating, nutrition and then sleep, and finding that as I layered these things in, they really helped my clients perform in their business. And it was a complete accident. There was a point where I looked at it's about 2 years into my personal training business before I transitioned online to work just with entrepreneurs. And I was like, you guys, all my clients are entrepreneurs. What's going on? What is what is doing this? This is so interesting. And they said to me, you know what, Tanessa, I originally came just because I thought I should work on my health. But what I didn't realize is I'm sleeping better now. So I'm waking up feeling a lot more energized. I don't have that afternoon energy crash. I'm in a better mood. I'm nicer. I'm more productive. And just doing all of this stuff is really helping with my business. And I was like, this is interesting because these are my people. I know as an entrepreneur myself, the things that we struggle with. And one of the side effects of building a business a lot of the time is that our health goes on the back burner. Meaning, we just stay up a couple nights late and we sacrifice just a little bit of sleep and then it becomes a habit, or we stop eating as well as we once did. And we start, grabbing some more food out of convenience. Workouts become deprioritized, or we're just getting through this launch or getting that next thing done. And then kids come in the picture and we have these really full lives and we just don't get to pay as much attention to our health. And because of that, our brain and our body and our business suffer. So that kind of was I was like, oh, these are my people. I can help these people, because I found that having amazing health helps you perform better in your business. And it was just like magic sauce after that.
Magic sauce. I love that. And as an entrepreneur who has had, recently, pre-COVID, diagnosis of anxiety. And I'm sure that was brought on by stress of running my business and being a mom and doing all the things. What do you recommend to us crazy entrepreneurs as far as our health goes and our sleep and our nutrition?
Yeah, it was interesting. If you'd have asked me this 5 years ago, I would have been like, well, there are 4 pillars to health, and they are sleep and they are nutrition, just how we all start. And then we evolve over time. Because one of the things that I like to do with the people I work with is I love data and I love spreadsheets and I love color coding. So I often use wearable technology like our Fitbits or Oura Rings to track data and look for trends specifically to see what changes make the most difference, like looking at data. Because as entrepreneurs, we are all about ROI, return on investment. So I want to know that we've got a ton to do. I don't want everyone out there doing all these health habits that they think they should do because they saw them on the internet, but they don't know if they apply to them or actually make a difference. So what I looked at over time was noticing that, oh my gosh, sleep is like that rising tide that lifts all boats. It makes it easier to manage our emotions. It makes it easier to have better energy, to stay focused, to make good choices when it comes to our food, to stick to our workout, to be more efficient with our time. So that's the place I've decided, over the years, starting with sleep as a foundation makes everything else easier. And it's not one of those sexy topics that we like to talk about. Most people will tell me, no, it's fine. I really want to do the food. Let's work out like this. Sleep, I don't want to work on that. But once I introduce to them how their brain is supposed to actually perform and how clear it's supposed to feel, everything else becomes easier. You're not fighting that uphill battle to constantly make good food choices because you have the brain power and the clarity and, the lack of indecision going on because you're underslept and you're feeling irritated that day. You could make those good decisions and everything else is just easier.
Wow. So sleep is one of my biggest, most difficult things. It has been on my vision board now for 2 years. And that's one of my goals, is to get more sleep. And I have worked at it. I still am not as successful as I would like to be. So, for example, I use a sleep app that will tell me how long I've been in bed versus how long I've actually slept. And for some reason, am just not hitting that 7 hours. What can you recommend to someone like me who just is trying, but not getting there?
Yeah. Well, the first question I would ask is, how much time are you giving yourself to sleep? If you want to achieve that 7 hours, how much time are you spending in bed, would you say?
Somewhere between 7 and 8 hours in bed, usually not quite 8. I'm usually at like 7.5, maybe 7:40.
Yeah. So when we look at sleep, there's two components that are equally as important. Obviously, how long we sleep, which is what we're talking about, and also the quality of the sleep. That's what makes your brain wake up, feel very refreshed and very focused. When it comes to sleep, one thing I didn't know before I started tracking my sleep with a Fitbit a couple of years ago was that there's a difference between sleep and sleep opportunity. So sleep is the actual amount of time you're spending asleep. Now, I told you that we've analyzed a ton of data from a bunch of entrepreneurs. The average entrepreneur, especially when I start, is awake between an hour and an hour and a half every night. Because what we're not accounting for is when we turn out the lights, it takes our brain time to descend from consciousness into sleep. Then at the end of every sleep cycle, and we go through anywhere between 4 to 6, even 7 sleep cycles, we wake up and our brains fully wake up, even if we don't have any recollection of it happening. Then there's the times our pets or our kids wake us up, or we need to go to the washroom. And then when we're coming out of sleep in the morning. So you add all of that up and it creates a large amount of time that we actually spend awake. So one of the first things I'm usually working on with people is, okay, we need to actually extend the amount of time that we spend in sleep. Which means if we want 7 hours and we are the average person, I would always suggest start with at least that 8 hours in bed trying to sleep. And then after you get in the hang of doing that, then you start working on some of the habits around your sleep to decrease the amount of time you spend awake, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Lock my kids out because they wake me up almost every night. Wow. A sleep opportunity. I like that word. And I actually have never thought about that before, as far as giving myself the adequate sleep opportunity hours. In my mind, I'm thinking, oh, I need 7 hours of sleep. So I put myself in bed to get 7. You know what I mean? Not giving myself that buffer of time.
Yeah.
So thanks for that, because now I need to readjust and give myself that.
Yeah. Well, and then we start to look at things like, okay, well, how can we make the sleep that we are getting more effective? Like, do you find that it's mostly the sleep on the early part of the night, like falling asleep is an issue, or is it waking up in the middle of the night? Do you think that's creating that awake time?
It's definitely waking up in the middle of the night for me, because I will fall asleep like that. And I sleep really, really well. So much so the other night, my son came in the room and I didn't even know he was in the bed. Yeah. But I woke up in the middle of the night and that's when I saw him there.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then sometimes it's hard for me to go back to sleep.
Yeah. Well, there's 2 things that I love to recommend when it comes to that really help. So normally, and especially with entrepreneurs, we are human doings. We forget how to be human beings. We go from meetings to plannings to scheduling to calls to this to that, to pick up the kids, to make the dinner. Like, we are literally on a scheduled to-do list right up until the moment we go to bed. And one of the first things I'll address is the fact that if we're waking up in the middle of the night, especially if we wake up in that hypervigilant state, and we know the ones where your brain is like, to-do list tomorrow, let's review right now. Like, what do I have to do? I can't go back to sleep. There's so much. If your brain is waking up in that, it is likely that we are going to bed and experiencing high levels of cortisol. So there's 2 things that I would actually recommend to really help reduce that awake time so that you don't end up long-term needing to spend so long in bed. The first one is actually something most of us don't think about. When we eat in the evening, it has the effect of keeping our heart rate elevated, our blood pressure elevated, and our digestion going. So our body is not trying to wind down. It is trying to digest the food, right? And one of the things that helps with restoration of sleep is being able to have the body relax. So eating within, on average, I find with my clients, 3 to 4 hours of bed will disrupt the restfulness and the quality of your sleep. And most of us usually grab a snack or sit down with some popcorn or something before bed, right? So this is factor number 1 when it comes to food, is proximity to bed, how close we're eating. And number 2 is what we're eating. So when we look at the type of food that we're consuming, carbohydrates specifically, and most of the carbohydrates that come after dinner aren't the good kind. Like, we're not having vegetables or, anything like that. It's the popcorn, it's the chips, it's the treats and stuff like that. Right. When we eat these things, our blood sugar goes up during the night, which honestly, it dehydrates us, which ends up making us need to use the washroom. And number two, that high blood sugar all night, like our bodies don't deal with it very well. So that blood sugar helps our stress levels stay high all night. So when we eat close to bed and we eat meals that are usually the processed food kinds, that literally triggers our body to stay in a state of fight or flight and digestion all night long. So we end up having more frequent wake ups. And that can be definitely a struggle sometimes. And we've done so many experiments with it. Like, honestly, if you just stop eating 3 hours before bed, try it for 2 weeks and start noticing the difference on that. So that's part number one. And then part number two, we look at is entrepreneurs. Here's what we love to do. We like to go, 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 go. And then think that sleep is like a light switch. Even if we can fall asleep right away, our brains aren't designed to go from the state they're in now, which is listening and thinking about what we're saying and processing this and applying this to our lives. Like, that's what our brains do as entrepreneurs. We are not meant to go from that to sleep. There's actually different brainwave states to descend through to get into sleep. So right now our brainwaves it's kind of cool. We're in a state called beta, focused, alert, attentive. This is fantastic for work on our business. It keeps us focused and very sharp. We like this. Now we need to make time before bed to gear down our brains. And I heard a great analogy the other day. Think about this. When you're pulling your car into your garage, you don't drive in there full speed and then slam on your brakes. You slow down, right? So this is what we want to think. So I always say, start with 30 minutes, work your way up to 60. Think about this. The next stage you want to take your brainwaves into, you want to slow down your brainwaves, is called alpha brainwaves. So during this time, you want to start removing outside input. So think about this all day. You're listening to podcast interviews, you're working with clients, you're working in your business. It's always input from other people's brains. We rarely get time to turn that off. So some people like to read a book. Some people like to stretch. Honestly, if those don't float your boat, take a warm shower, take your makeup off, put your PJs on. It's that time where your thoughts and your emotions are taking that forefront. Having some time spent in that slows you down and allows you to start just like, my brain is not going as fast. So I usually spend anywhere from 20 to 40 minutes, depending on the day I've had, in that. And then I like to carve out 5 to 10 minutes of time right at the end to do one more slowdown, in which I'll turn out the lights and I'll just focus on my breathing and I'll just kind of really tune it inwards. But you can see this trend I'm creating right before we fall asleep is this, it's like a slide into sleep, and it's a luxurious slowdown. And that is what gears your brain and takes your body's experience of the day and of the stress and winds it down, so that we don't go into the night fully stressed out, having those midnight wake ups and creating that experience where you need to be in bed for so long just to get that minimum number of sleep.
Right. Okay. So I am like not doing good on that part at all, because we tend to eat late in our house. And so we need to bump that way up. Well, what do you tell someone who likes a little snack? Like if you're hungry before you go to bed, which happens to me every night. And I don't like to have that like little hunger pain when I'm going to bed either. So it's like, oh, I ate 3 hours ago. I'm hungry again. What do you do?
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is what I would start to look at here is, what is it about the rest of the food during the day that's not carrying you through the evening? Because as humans, we should be able to go 12 hours between meals, usually, if you think from dinner to breakfast the next morning. So what we start to look at is, are we getting enough calories during the day? Because I can't tell you how many women I work with that are like, it's fine, but they're eating 1,200 calories, and our bodies just need way more than that to function and keep our brain sharp and our energy high. So I would look at that as number one. Number two, intermittent fasting has become very popular and common. And even just as for our busy schedules, it's just easier sometimes to go skip right to lunch.
Right.
But we need to remember, especially as women in this conversation, that our hormone cycles are different. Our hormones change throughout a month, whereas the male hormone cycle changes throughout a day. So what that means is that intermittent fasting at certain times of the month, specifically in the last 2 weeks before your period starts, actually stresses our body out because cortisol is higher during that time. So one of the things I love to recommend is experiment with, what if you shifted your whole eating window earlier in the day.
Okay.
Right. And so if we got those calories in the morning, so that's the thing is, are we getting enough energy in? Number two is I look at, are you eating foods that are keeping your blood sugar stable? So we kind of alluded to that earlier. So basically when we eat a lot of processed foods, our blood sugar goes up and our blood sugar goes down, and we get these waves. And I always say, if you're feeling hungry within 2 to 3 hours of eating, it's usually because you had that blood sugar swing. So what you can do, it's not about eating no carb or low carb. It's about balancing your meals out with, are you getting fiber from vegetables? Is there healthy fat in there? And is there protein at every meal? It's kind of like this idea of never eating naked carbs, meaning carbs by themselves, because they just cause that blood sugar swing, which will cause you brain fog. It'll make you feel, your energy will crash and dip. You'll feel hungry a couple hours later. So I would look at A, are we getting enough energy during the day? And B, are we getting a well-rounded meal at dinner? So I would look at something like, getting some kind of whole grain, like a rice or a quinoa or something at dinner with some salmon that has your fat in it, and then vegetables. So I would look at something like that and work on the sustainability of the meals. If you're constantly getting hungry at night, that's the first thing I would look at.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think for me now, it's just kind of become a habit where I'm like, oh, I want a little snack before I go to bed. Anyway.
Yeah.
But tell me a little bit about biohacking. What is that? What does that mean?
Yeah. Isn't that a fun word? Don't go
It
Google it.
is.
Don't go Google it, because there's a spectrum of biohacking I always love to talk about. And if you go to Google biohacking, you are going to get the really techie end where people are like, freezing themselves in cold chambers and in cold tubs and doing all kinds of light therapies. And that is one end of biohacking.
Okay.
But the other end of biohacking is also just doing things that are going to have a positive effect on your longevity, your wellness, your focus, how you feel during the day. And so biohacking, to define that word, is making changes to your external environment. So whether that means modifying the lighting at night, the temperature of your bedroom to help you sleep better, or your internal environment. So what you eat, how you're sleeping, if you're moving, making changes to those things to help you feel better. And the way I like to do it, like I was alluding to earlier, is I use some kind of wearable tech to know that I'm making good use of my time, because I want to see, okay, if I start walking instead of 5,000 steps a day, if I get it up to 8, do I sleep better at night? Is my energy better? Because if these habits aren't making me feel better, that's not something I want to be putting on my schedule, because there's probably something more effective for me. So biohacking is essentially finding the strategies that work best for you, that help you feel that clarity and wake up feeling well rested.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense. I know our light bulbs have been replaced in our home, thanks to my husband. We have the, what are they called?
Smart bulbs.
Smart bulbs. Yes.
Yeah.
So we have those.
Indoor lighting is we don't even recognize, I think, as humans at this point right now, how much it plays into our health and specifically our sleep, because there are certain colors of light that prevent us from falling asleep. Like they actually enter our eyes and stop the sleepy hormone melatonin. And there are type of lights that make us fall asleep, different colors. And so it's a great idea to use those smart bulbs, because if we can gear our lights to be white and bright in the morning, and then more oranges, yellows, and reds in the evenings, it's going to promote, great sleep.
Yeah. I need to figure out we need to have them all over the house so my kids can have that same like mellowness happening in the evening.
Absolutely.
Because neither one of them like to sleep. So, but no, that's really good. So very, very helpful. And I definitely have some work to do in many areas. What do you recommend, kind of our first steps for those of us who haven't thought about this and how it impacts us as entrepreneurs? What do you recommend, or where do you recommend we start first?
Yeah, the easiest thing that we can start with, and we talked about sleep before, is to pick a bedtime and honor it. So I know that that's super challenging for some of us to do. And the reason for that is because at the end of the day, sometimes we just want that me time and to unwind. And that's the time when the kids are in bed. And maybe you just get to put down your email for a second. We just really want that me time. And it comes at the cost of staying up a little later some nights. But if we can maintain a consistent bedtime, it is going to help us get more sleep and feel a lot better. And that's one of the biggest things I find that the clients I work with struggle. And I usually find it's because, like we were talking about, we go all day in our businesses without taking time to actually have lunch and just have lunch. It's always lunch and email, and we're probably on social, or right. We go through our day and it's just back to back to back to meetings. We don't check in. Like, how am I feeling right now? Like, oh, I'm feeling really anxious today because, like you, I've struggled with anxiety most of my life, and not just checking and being like, okay, what's going on right now? Like, why am I feeling like this? Taking those micro breaks in there to really help you find small chunks of time to slow down. Like, I'm not talking about taking a 2-hour nap in the middle of the day, but taking 5 minutes to just be like, where am I right now? What's going on? Where's all the tension being held? Like, how am I doing? Can I take 5 minutes here? Because when we can create those pockets of space during our day, we don't end up reaching the end of our workday, 4, 5, 6 o'clock, and feeling completely exhausted. Because that's when we collapse onto the couch and watch Netflix, but we're also scrolling our phone, and we're not getting what we want out of that me time, right? Like, when I ask my clients, I'm like, what is the purpose of your evening? Whether it's Netflix, whether it's phone scrolling. Cause I watch Netflix, I scroll my phone at night. It's just sometimes one of those nice, like, brain off moments. But when we look at, like, what's the purpose of that? And it's always like, well, my me time, I just want to zone out. I want to feel better. I want to feel like I've had some downtime to feel a little bit more restored and refreshed. And my next question is always like, well, is the 4 episodes of Netflix with the phone in your hand making you feel that way? And the answer is always no, right? It just is literally brain dead time. So my offer is, well, why not take some of that time and do something that creates that feeling of restoration? So for me, I have found that is reading. It just lets my brain enter a different world. I like to read fiction at the end of the night. And so for me, I take 45 minutes of Netflix, pair that with 45 minutes of reading, so that I'm getting some of that time where I just get to turn off, and some of that time where I get to recharge. Because I find that the reason we stay up so late all the time is because we don't ever get the feeling we're chasing with all this downtime. So we just like, oh, one more episode, then I'll go to bed because I just can't get off the couch. You know what I mean? So it's like, whether you have some blogs that you want to read, or maybe you're a puzzle person or a paint by numbers, or you read, or you like yoga, or whatever it is, gardening, whatever it is that fills your cup. If we just put a little bit of that in the me time, we wouldn't need hours that push into our bedtime to feel like a human again. Because what we're doing now is not creating that. So meaning just changing little bits of it.
And I'll be honest, a lot of times the scroll of the phone actually makes me feel more anxious because I'm looking at posts and, oh gosh, I needed to post today, or I needed to do this, or I needed to do that. And so it actually does not help me wind down at all. If anything, it just makes my to-do list longer for the next day of all the things that I should be doing.
And it makes that, what I find is almost more dangerous than the actual to-do list is the silent to-do list. When you see the post of, someone getting a workout in on that day, and it's not something you're actually going to add to your to-do list tomorrow, but it's you going like, I haven't worked out in so long. Silent to-do list. It's something that is always going to remind you of what you're not doing. And I find with social media, every time you see a post, even if it feels mindless, you need to consciously make a decision on, do I keep scrolling? Do I agree with this post? Do I not agree? Do I engage? Do I comment? Do I like? Do I scroll past it? Like, that's all going on top of the blue light from the screen, stimulating our brain. So it's like that double hit of like, brain is staying engaged, even though it feels like you're zoning out. Because I don't think any of us can scroll through social media these days without finding something we disagree with or really agree with even. Right. Like, or we need to share this. So I find just like, give yourself some time without that input of other people's brains. What are you thinking? How are you feeling?
Right. No, I like that a lot. And, I've gotten better over the past few months where I set out to say, okay, at 6 o'clock, I'm going to kind of start my wind down, more so really just being conscientious around the kids and talking to them and connecting with them and eating dinner and all of that stuff, just to make sure that that piece of me is fulfilled as well as a mom. So have a little ways to go, but I love this conversation because I think it's things that we need to think about, because I don't like the brain fog and I can often feel it. I mean, it's literally something you can feel that lays over your brain and you're not able to think as clear and as sharp.
Yeah.
So I noticed you have on a Fitbit and you mentioned the Aura ring, right?
Yeah.
So I don't like to sleep in jewelry. And I love the idea of that ring though, because I'm like, oh, it can like monitor everything. Are there any other apps or something you'd recommend outside of, for those of us who may not like to sleep in jewelry or things?
Yeah. I mean, like beyond if you're looking at monitoring sleep, I have found particularly that the ones that like just record your sound and kind of estimate what's going on with your sleep, they're not as accurate. So like, that's the one thing about the ring is it is nice and low profile. But I just discovered an app a couple of weeks ago, actually. It's called HRV4, the number 4 training. And I've been kind of playing with it. So if you've never heard of the word HRV before, it stands for heart rate variability. And it's basically, to make it simple, a score that tells you how resilient your body is to stress. So everyone's baseline are different. So you and I could not like look at each other's scores and say yours is higher, it's better, mine's lower, it's worse. It's just always with your own baseline. But what this does is it uses the camera on your phone and you hold your finger up to it and it measures not only your heart rate, but the consistency of your heartbeat. So we always like to think if my heart's beating 60 beats per minute, that's 1 per second. Well, that's actually inaccurate. Our heart beats inconsistently during that time. It just gets 60 beats total in a minute. So when you're in a relaxed state, your heart is beating, it'll beat, and then it'll be a little longer gap and a shorter gap. And that's when your body's nice and laid back. But think about when you're stressed out, your heart needs to get blood pumping. It's very consistent with your timing. So what I would use this app for specifically is situationally to check in with how you're doing. So let's say, I don't know, for me, I might have a day of back-to-back client calls and I want to check in maybe midday how I'm doing. I would use this app to do a spot check. How am I doing? And know that like my spot checks all have to be consistent. So if I'm always checking mid-client day, that's a good day to do it, or mid-meeting day. And I could just check in. And if I notice that my score is dropping, that says to me, Tanessa, your body or your brain is stressed out right now. You need to take a minute tonight, recover. You need to get a bit more sleep. Maybe you need to go out for a walk. But if I'm doing good, then that indicates to me that I'm doing a good job with stress resiliency. Because I think that's one of the conversations I feel like it's muddled a lot on the internet is this, there's a very big self-care and, de-stressing movement. But I think that the goal of eliminating stress is not only unrealistic, but it's very out of personality for us as entrepreneurs. We generally are very organized for the most part. We like structure. So I like to focus on the idea of stress resiliency.
Okay.
When
I like
you
that.
are stressed out, because we're going to get emails that set us off. We're going to get customers or clients or somebody on the internet that says my reel is a cringe. It's fine. I'm over it. But you know what I mean? Like we're going to get those. Like stress is not something we should run away from. It's something we should learn to be resilient. So meaning when you find yourself in that moment where you are like, I can't think, my brain is foggy, I'm feeling overwhelmed. I don't like how I'm feeling right now. I should probably just get a glass of wine or grab some cookies or whatever it is, skip the workout, just work through this. What if instead we had tools to like intentionally, okay, wind this back. Let's bring this back a step. And that is where that stress resiliency comes in. And that's one of the cool things that you can do if you're using that tool, that HRV tool specifically is like, okay, I'm stressed out right now. Where is my score? If I just sat here and just, maybe did some deep breathing for 3 minutes, can I pull myself back to neutral? Because that resiliency skill will create so many more health benefits than just telling yourself, I didn't make time for my 1 hour bubble bath and my 3 hour reading block and my nap in the afternoon, because that's just not going to be realistic, especially if you have like a ton of obligations, kids, business, clients.
Right. All of that. Well, I definitely need to check out that app because I would use it, to just really check in. That's a really great app. Thanks for sharing that. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
So, Tanessa, tell people, how can they reach you or how can they work with you?
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram at Tanessa Shears. I'm on there all the time. So you can always just send me a DM if you ever wanted to work with me one-on-one. I'm a health consultant. So my job specifically is to give simple strategies that fit in with our entrepreneurial lives to help us feel very clear and very focused. So you can always send me a DM on there. But beyond that, I have a podcast called Becoming Limitless. So what I do is I take one very specific hack. So it could even just be like, okay, how can we use lighting in our day to help us be healthier? And then I also talk about not only how to apply it, but how does it affect your business? So every episode is like literally one thing that you could listen to, work on for that week, notice the difference or not, and then apply your next thing. So it's a really cool way to layer in that strategy like that. But it's full of resources. And that's one thing. Like, I'm 37 weeks pregnant right now, and I am so excited to get back to podcasting when I don't need daily naps, because this baby at this point is definitely causing for some extra naps in the afternoon, which came at the expense of the podcast, but I love it. And I'm looking forward to getting back to it in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, no, that is absolutely great. And congratulations. That's
Thank
exciting.
You. Thank
it's really
you.
exciting. And then you'll have to like maybe fit it in when the baby's taking a nap.
Well, you know what? I have a 2-year-old right now. We figured it out the first time, so we'll figure it out the second time. That's
exactly. Congratulations. That'll be fun.
Yeah.
Oh, they'll be so cute.
Yeah.
Well, good. And I will definitely check out the podcast because I haven't had an opportunity to listen yet. So I need to do that and start biohacking all the things in my life to get to more sleep. And so I can just be really energetic. And it's funny because sometimes I'll even say to myself, if I could have a little bit more energy, because I get stuff done, but I'm like, if I had more energy, imagine what I could do.
That's, what, that is the single reason I have found that I like to start with sleep, because think about this. If it normally takes you, let's say 6 hours to get through what you have to get done, but your brain, you wake up, you're well rested, clear, brain fog is, at bay, your energy is good, and you can get through it in 5 hours. You've now created an hour. And I mean, you could fill it up with more work, but you could also go to walk. You could also maybe search up some new whole food recipes. You could take a yoga class. Like, that is how you create time for your health, because sometimes the idea of all of a sudden, like, what, you want me to add things into my schedule? So like, create it through brain efficiency when you no longer need to take so long to do the work.
Yeah. I like that a lot. I like that a lot. Well, everyone needs to check out your podcast so we can get it all together and be even more successful in our businesses and just have it last forever for the long term. Because that's what we need. We have to be healthy if we're going to run our businesses. So I really appreciate you for joining me today.
Thank you for having us on. I always love just breaking down some of the barriers about what we think is possible in our business. And it is possible to have a successful business and your health. I think it's just finding the right strategy and not doing the shoulds, but doing the things that actually work.
Exactly. I love that. Thank you so much, Tanessa. I appreciate you. I want to thank Tanessa so much for being a part of the Become Your Own Boss podcast. I am going to, in the future, share some takeaways from this episode, because I am going to implement some of the things that Tanessa talked about today, and I will let you know how it goes. So Tanessa, thank you so much. And you all can find her contact info in the show notes. Thank you for listening to the podcast today. You can follow me on Instagram or TikTok at Become Your Own Boss Podcast. And you can also always email me. My email address is monica@monicaallen.com. Please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. And lastly, I'd love it if you would share the podcast with a friend, fellow entrepreneur, or someone that you know is an aspiring entrepreneur. Now is the time. Now is the time to level up, leave a legacy, and become your own boss.